Hello everybody, this is John Mark Johnson Jr. again, host of Reformed GGA and also the Relationship and Truth YouTube channel for those of you who watch that. I am here with another gun to review. Go figure. And the gun that I'm going to review today is the CZ P-09. And I actually happen to be wearing it right now, so I'll just go ahead and show you how it does or perhaps does not conceal. Right now I'm wearing it on my waist. And most people, unless they're actually specifically looking for it, don't typically see it. But it is in fact on my waist. And here it is. The CZ P-09. Now let's just go ahead and check and make sure that it's clear first. So go ahead and drop the magazine. You can see that it's an empty magazine. Nothing in the well. Now we'll go ahead and open up the gun. I can visually see that there's nothing in the chamber. I can feel that there's nothing in the chamber, so this is a safe gun. Alright, let's talk about why I got it in the first place. And this was basically, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was my second handgun that I ever bought. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that this was my second ever handgun. And my first handgun, just to back up, my first handgun was another CZ product. It was a CZ 75 Compact, and I got that one because I wanted something that I could do concealed carry with, but would primarily be a range gun. So it was a fairly heavy gun, fairly small caliber, fairly cheap caliber. It was a 9mm as well. This is also a 9mm. So fairly expensive to shoot, relatively fun to shoot, and that it's a heavier gun. It doesn't feel like it's going to fly out of your hand, anything like that. Overall, very satisfied with it in those regards, but as I started looking around at what 9mm could and couldn't do, I discovered that there actually are some really cool things that 9mm rounds can do, but you need a longer barrel for that. And so I started looking around and said, well, I know CZ, I already have a CZ, they've done good for me so far. Let's go ahead and see what else they have to offer. Do they have anything bigger to offer? And it turns out they did. The CZ P-09 is basically their full-size, their primary full-size offering that they have right now, other than a full-size 75 and the older models like that. This is kind of their new current full-duty size gun. And so I looked into that and said, well, that's long enough to do what I want it to do, and I went into the store and asked to see one, and this was the only one that they had in stock. This is the suppressor ready version, which of course has an extended barrel with that is threaded. It has a barrel protector on there right now, of course, but it is threaded. It has elevated sights, and these, by the way, are night sights. My neighbors are not home today, so I can point this in their direction. It'd be just fine. And I actually really like the sight picture on this, and it has a nice long sight radius, and so I'm actually very accurate with this gun. On a good day, I don't have too many good days, but on a good day, I'm actually just as accurate with this gun as I am with my 22 Magnum pistol. And 22 Magnum pistols do not have a lot of felt recoil. I'm fairly accurate with my 22 Magnum pistol. It's easily my most accurate handgun, and this one, if I'm having a good day, my eyes are working right and I can get a decent grip on it, and I'll talk about that here in a second. I can do just as good with this thing as I can do with the 22 Magnum pistol, and that's coming from someone who's recoil sensitive. So, very good gun. I like the sights on it. Very good in that regard. Overall mechanical accuracy is just fine. Not that I'm ever going to push a gun to its limit as far as mechanical accuracy is concerned, but it is there. But yeah. So the suppressor ready version, like I said, has the threaded barrel, has elevated night sights so that you can see past the suppressor if you get it on. Those of you who know me know I'm not super big into ATF things, you know, like suppressors and all that, but it does give me added barrel length. And like I said, this was the version that was available when I went to buy one, so that's what you're kind of stuck with. Also, I do actually kind of like the raised sights, and I like the sight picture that they present, but I'm not a huge fan of night sights just because, well, while it allows you to line up your sights in the dark, you have no idea what you're lining them up on if it's that dark that you can actually make use of the night part of it. So kind of pointless. But still, even in the daytime, they show up pretty well, and they show up as kind of a really light green color. But it does work out just fine, and like I said, I'm very happy with the sight picture, good accuracy. This particular one did come with 2 of these extended base plate magazines that give you 2 extra rounds. And do I think that that's all that necessary? You know, 2 extra rounds, especially in a magazine this big, and by the way, the standard magazine size for these is 19. Go ahead and see if I can show you that there. If you look at the largest number down there, it's 19. That's the standard capacity for these magazines. So with 1 in the chamber, that's a 20-round gun. This adds 2 extra rounds to it, so total of 22 rounds in it if I wanted to. But as far as the magazine itself is concerned, 19 rounds versus 21 rounds, is it that big of an advantage? Probably not. But one thing I do like about these extended base plate magazines is that when you're slapping them in the gun, is it gives you a little bit of distance between the frame of the gun and the magazine itself. So I can slap them in the gun and I don't have to worry about pinching anything or getting things caught in weird places. It gives me a little bit of extra distance to work with. And they also have a little bit of a bevel on them, so if I'm going to do a grab and release, it gives me a good purchase point to grab onto. So as far as giving the extra couple rounds, not a huge deal, especially when you're talking about 19 versus 21. It's probably not that. It's probably not enough of a difference to make a difference. But the fact that it is just a little bit bigger makes slapping them in that much safer. The fact that there's actually a little bit of a bevel on it makes grabbing them to take them out a little bit easier. Because let's face it, when we're at the range, you know, one-handed changes are not usually going to be the thing, because you don't usually want to drop your mags in the dirt all that much unless you're actually specifically practicing a tactical drill or something like that. If you're just target shooting, just plinking with it, you don't want to get your mags dirty and all that. So you are going to, in fact, you know, actually grab them, and having a little bit more to grab onto is nice. But again, that's basically just the way the gun came. If it didn't have that, I wouldn't mind, and I don't think it'd be a big issue, but it is the way the gun came, and so I'm going to take advantage of it all that I can. One thing that actually impresses me about the gun is just how lefty-friendly it is despite not being a left-handed gun. First of all, this little lever up here is found on both sides of the gun, and that is the decocking mechanism. So when you rack the slide, of course, it's going to push the hammer back. And in this configuration, the trigger is fairly light and easy to set off. People who get hammer-fired guns like me, one of the things that we like to do is we like to drop the hammer, because it makes the trigger harder to pull, and it makes it a little bit safer to holster and things like that. That's one of the reasons why we like hammer-fired guns instead of striker-fired guns. Striker-fired guns, you pull the slide back and all of the stuff is going on basically the inside of the gun, and the trigger on them is usually, at least by comparison, relatively light. Usually somewhere between 4.5 and 5.5 pounds for a lot of striker-fired guns. And that's not bad, but we want something that's a little less likely to go off. So for the first round, we want to drop the hammer. This gun allows you to drop the hammer just with the push of the button. And it drops the hammer forward, the gun is still loaded, all those things, it's ready to go. This one isn't, because of course it's empty, there's nothing in it. But on a real one, it would still be ready to go, ready to fire, but because the hammer's forward, the trigger is going to be a lot harder to pull. And this one, with the hammer forward on it, it is an insanely heavy trigger and kind of gritty. When you're out there shooting it, it doesn't really, you don't notice it as much, but it's a very heavy trigger pull. This one's probably somewhere in the 10 to 12 range. I don't actually have a scale here to measure it, so if you want to, you know, do that on your own, but it is a very heavy trigger pull. And in single action, it's actually not bad at all. It's probably closer to the 4.5 pound range, but when the hammer's forward, or in the half cock position, which it drops to, that's pretty heavy trigger pull. Like I said, somewhere in the 10 to 12 pound range. It's not going to go off accidentally very easily. It definitely takes some doing. But as I was saying, it's actually a very lefty-friendly gun. despite being technically a right-handed gun. First of all, these decocking levers do occur on both sides of it, so if I'm holding it with my left hand, I can just come up and thumb it if I want to. Not bad. Or with my index finger, I can hit it. Either way works just fine. Then on the other side, you have the slide stop and slide release. And on most guns, if you're right-handed, you're going to push up on that with your thumb. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but you'd push up on your thumb while you're pulling the slide back, and that is what holds the slide back for you. It's the slide stop. And it's big enough that you can work it as a slide release too. But for a left-handed person, well, there's nothing for their thumb to push on. But because this slide stop is so big, I can actually push on it with my index finger, and that will actually be enough to hold open the slide. So if I was left-handed, I could get the slide stop to work on this just fine just by pushing up with my index finger. That's not bad. There's a lot of guns that do not have a very big slide stop button there. You can't do that with. But this one you can do it with just fine. And me, frankly, I'm kind of weak, got small hands, and I can still manage it. I would imagine that pretty much any left-handed person who has enough strength to rack the slide could do it. And as far as racking the slide is concerned, it's not bad. There are always going to be some people that will have a hard time racking the slide on guns, but this one isn't too bad. 9mm usually aren't terrible, but I've definitely had guns that are worse. This one's not bad at all, so that can work. And then as far as the magazine release, and like I said, this is the same empty mag, I can use my index finger on my left hand and drop the mag just fine that way, or my middle finger works just as well. And so if I was someone who was left-handed looking for a full-size gun and I couldn't find any truly left-handed options or truly ambidextrous options, this is something that I would definitely look at. That is not bad to operate with your left hand at all. I was actually very pleasantly surprised by that. And a lot of the left-handed shooters that I know who have shot this thing have very much so appreciated that all of the controls you can operate with your left hand just fine. I don't actually have to worry about trading them out. They're big enough and conveniently located enough that most people with their left hand can operate the gun without any significant problems whatsoever. So even though it's technically a right-handed gun, it works just fine for every left-handed shooter that I know. That's pretty cool. Alright, so we've already talked about some of the add-on features, the threaded barrel, the night sights, the extended magazine, all those kinds of things. And by the way, that is one thing I love about 9mm, is that a stagger stack, double stack, whatever you want to call it, 9mm magazine can hold a lot of rounds. It's cheap to shoot, and you can hold a lot of rounds to shoot in a full-size gun, at least. Like I said, I actually love it because a lot of the ammo that I get for defensive purposes, I usually just get them in the 20-round boxes because that's more convenient. You know, I usually don't need 1,000 of my defensive rounds at the same time, so I don't usually get them in bulk. Usually just the boxes of 20. And that thing holds, especially with the extended base plate on there, it holds a box of 20 just fine. And so I usually have one of these magazines that's loaded up with my defensive rounds, and then the other magazine I usually try to keep open for plinking and things like that. And it came with 2 of these, and you can get more. They are kind of expensive magazines, by the way, though. These ones usually run somewhere in the mid-40s. So not overly cheap, just warning you ahead of time on that, but still very good magazines. And frankly, I don't really feel the need to carry a backup magazine when I have this gun. I've got 20 rounds in the gun at all times. That, I think, is going to be sufficient for most things that would happen out and about. Now, this is not my bedside gun. My bedside gun, I want to have at least a 30-round magazine and a spare nearby. But for when I'm out and about, I usually don't worry about having as many rounds on me in those cases. 20 rounds ought to be enough to finish most jobs. Just saying. Now, I'm not saying that if you want to carry a backup magazine that's a bad thing or anything like that, but yeah, something this size, a little hard to carry extra anyways. Finding a decent way to conceal the gun is sometimes going to be harder, you know, hard enough as it is without trying to worry about concealing extra of these. But again, that's ultimately your choice. Personally, with this gun, I feel just fine carrying one magazine, but other people might want to carry a spare, and that's up to them. Let's go ahead, and we've already talked about the buttons here. We've talked about the trigger pull, like I said, on double action, fairly heavy, 10 to 12 pounds. Once you get it down to single action, around 4.5. Oh, let's go ahead and talk about the reset here. So like I said, for the double action, fairly heavy trigger, and it's kind of stagey. There's a little bit of grit in it. It's smoothed out some because I've shot it quite a bit. But still kind of stagey for that first one. It's definitely a defensive gun. It's meant to give you some resistance and lots of opportunities to stop if you want to. Now the reset on it is also kind of far forward. It's not a competition gun. So let's keep going here. And it is audible, and it is very tactile that it has reset. And then once you're down into single action, you can get a little bit of take up, get a wall, but it's not super defined wall. It just kind of eases right into the break, and the single action on it is actually rather enjoyable and not nearly as gritty and those kinds of things. So once you got past that first initial shot, it's actually a very manageable gun. And the first shot I don't mind that much anyways. Oh, while we're still on externals, one thing I did want to talk about is the grip. This grip for me is not, it works a lot better than other guns that I've had, but it's still not quite optimal. What I'm finding that works best for me for shooting this gun is to treat the handle almost kind of like a handlebar and get my palm as far on the back side of that handle as I can. And then my other hand just comes up for support, but like I said, my neighbors are absent today, so this is not going to be a big thing. But my wrist is actually pretty far over the center line of the gun to make sure as much as my palm is meeting up with that gun as possible. And when I do that, I can maintain a really solid grip, and gun doesn't move around too much in my hands at all. And even with double action pull, it's not a big thing at all. And I like that. And that's how I grip the gun and how it works best for me. So I have a lot of pressure on my front fingers, I have a lot of pressure on my palm, and when I take my hand off, you can see I've kind of got a little bit of a road runner effect there. Looks like it's been run over by something, and that's because of the strap on the back. And I actually like that. When I can see those little divots in my hand, that lets me know that I have a strong enough grip on the gun. My problem with it, though, is that there's these sections on either side of the handle that don't have any of that texturing. And that's why I have to get my hand so far over the center line to actually get a hold of that texturing properly. And if I do that, man, it's great and I'm accurate, but there's no texturing on either side of it. It's very smooth in those places. Smooth, and that makes it a little bit prone to slipping, especially if you're doing it from the holster. If you're out there and you have out there at the range and you have the time to line it up nice and good and then push out, great. But as a defensive gun, you want something that you can draw from the holster and get out real well. And this one, I have a hard time drawing it from the holster. It's doable. It's not bad. I'm certainly one of my better handguns, but it would be better if they added some texturing to the side of the texturing that they already have there. The front strap is not bad at all. I actually like it. Again, there's a patch there where there's a patch on either side where there's no, or it's smooth where there's no texturing. I wish they expanded that out. But the actual front of it is pretty good, and it's pretty grippy. But the back could be a little bit more angular and definitely needs to wrap all around. And this gun does come with a couple extra back straps, by the way. They're actually a real major pain to change out on this gun. There is a version of the gun that has a little lanyard loop here at the back, and it actually helps in the disassembly and reassembly process. Without that little lanyard loop, Taking down the gun so you can get to the back strap is actually a bit of a pain. I did that once, and only once. Enough to get the back straps changed, and I discovered that the small one, which is the one that it had on it to begin with, was the right one for me. And it was like, well, I went through and tested them all out for nothing and fought with the thing tooth and nail to get it to work. And yeah, it just wasn't worth it. I would recommend that if you get one of these and it happens to work the way that it is, don't mess with the back strap. Only if it just absolutely will not work for you, consider changing it, because it's not fun to mess with. At least on this one. If it has the lanyard loop on it, it's not as bad, but this one that's flat, no lanyard loop, because there's a little button in there that is connected to the hammer spring and all those things that you have to get into and take out, and there's a cross pin, and it's a pain. Yeah, if you have the lanyard loop on it, though, you have something that you can actually push on and get some leverage with, but without it, it's a pain. It's just a royal pain. Alright, so that's the externals. Oh, another thing that I did want to mention about this is I really like the beaver tail on this one. You can see in pretty much every profile that it actually is decently curved, which means that when you're holding it, it's going to be comfortable. When you're wearing it and it's pressing up against you, the fact that it actually has some decent curve to it means that it's not going to really dig into your side as bad as some other tangs, like my smaller one, my CZ75 Compact. It has a good tang on it, which is nice for shooting, but in profile it's fairly angular, very, very thin, and it causes problems. This one, not bad at all. So yeah, for shooting, keep your hand nice and low, clear of the hammer and all that. Never get hammer bite from this gun or anything even remotely close to it. Like most CZs, the slide is set fairly high because it uses a reverse rail system, and so very little risk of getting fingers and whatnot caught in the rail system on this one. So I can get a very high grip on this gun, be very comfortable with it. Absolutely fantastic. Now, one thing that you guys are probably wondering about is the takedown on it, and I'm reaching for a ballpoint pin here because that is basically my tool of choice for disassembling this thing. And to take one of these down, there are a couple of lines on the slide and slide in the frame that you need to line up. And so the easiest way to do that is to usually put the hammer into the semi-cock position, and I love CZs because of that. Most CZs have a semi-cock position that becomes the default for when you want to carry the gun safely. You can put it into the semi-cock position, but also when you take it down, you have that semi-cock position that helps you out. Alright, so go ahead and line it up a little bit, and then I take the back end of a ballpoint pin and I'm going to push on the release pin right there. Right, and that will cause it to come out just a little bit on the other side. Pop that, and then the slide and the frame come apart. As you can see on the slide here, if I can actually get it out and show it to you, has those nice long reverse rails on them that CZs are known for and make them work quite reliably, fairly accurately. The recoil spring is retained, so that is nice. I'm not going to fully take it apart because then I'd have to take off the barrel nut, and I just don't want to mess with that. Well, actually, let's see if I have something on here that I can use to take apart that. I kind of cheat, and I have a little screwdriver set on my keychain. One of those things that has a little flathead screw things on them, but I just use the big surface of it. And go ahead and take out the recoil spring, and like I said, it is retained, which is kind of good and bad. It makes cleaning it a little bit more difficult, but it is nice in that you're not going to lose anything, at least easily. Alright, then twist off the barrel nut. That protects the threads, and of course if you get a suppressor, that's how you're going to mount it to this thing, is with the threads. Barrel comes out, of course. Show you guys that. Fairly clean lines, most of it, which means that it does clean up fairly nicely. Show you the face of the bolt back there. The extractor, you can see it has an external extractor here. It's not huge, but it is fairly robust, fairly good size, if I can show it to you there. It actually extends down a little bit, and so it grabs fairly nicely. pretty good design that way. Like it. All right, and then of course, reassembly is same thing in reverse order. So go ahead and put the slide in there. Sorry, the barrel in there. Barrel nut needs to go on. And by the way, this is a 1/2 by 20 threading for those of you who are wondering about that, which is fairly standard for 9mm in the US. Now, you have to be careful with CZ because CZ is, of course, European, Czech, and so a lot of their products they will initially make for the European market, and they've got some weird, goofy sizes compared to what we're used to. All right, make sure I can't undo it with my fingers. And by the way, when shooting, this barrel nut will come loose, so you don't want to necessarily shoot it too long, or just bring something with you that you can tighten it with. But yeah, barrel nuts do tend to loosen up on handguns especially. And there's a reason for that. When I tighten this thing up, I can't tighten it any more than I can untighten it because I have to be able to take down the gun to clean it. So I don't want to over tighten it, and that means that it's going to shake itself loose at least eventually. But yeah, right now, can't do it by hand, but after I shoot it a little bit, yeah, it'll come loose. Alright, so put the recoil spring back in there, and by the way, this one does have a drop safety like the vast majority of modern CZs do. Go ahead and put it back on the frame, but before I do that, I did want to show you some things in the frame real quick. Interestingly, where those nice long guide rails that I showed you meet up, there's actually only a couple places in the frame where they meet up. There's a couple of rails here, and then there's one on the other side up front, and then rail back there, joining one on the other side. And as far as on the frame of the gun, those are the only places where the slide is actually held down. It's just those 4 contact points. Other than that, it's basically freewheeling. And that actually does contribute to the accuracy in a great many regards. It makes it as close to a free-floated barrel in a handgun design as you can get, kind of. It's not bad as far as accuracy is concerned at all. And then I need to line up those points again. Snap the pin in place. Check the slide. And it sits perfect. All right. So that is the takedown on it. The takedown, I would say, is definitely simpler than things like 1911s, and definitely simpler than high points that require a lot of extra doing, we'll say. But not as easy as most striker fired guns or my Bersa TPR-9C. So it's kind of middle of the range, but not bad. It's very workable. Alright, so that is the takedown, the reassembly process, all of that. We've already discussed most of the features, fairly basic and all that, and just to reiterate for people, really do like this gun, especially in terms of safety. Once I've chambered around, not only can I, drop the hammer on it to make holstering it and unholstering it safer, another thing that's nice about this one, you'll notice that the back side of that hammer is actually very flat. And that is so that when I'm holstering it, I can actually put my thumb on the back of the hammer and push, and then slide it into the holster with my thumb on the hammer. And what that is going to do is it's actually going to make it harder for the gun to go off. Now, in this configuration, it's already pretty hard to go off because it's, like I said, it's a 10 to 12 pound trigger pull, pretty heavy. I put my thumb on that hammer, and it's going to add additional force to it. So it's already a 10 to 12 pound trigger pull, and then I'm applying force with my thumb, and it's not going off. I can't pull. I can't pull it off. Now I take my thumb out of the way, and it'll go off. But with my thumb in the way, and I'm not applying too much force with my thumb, I can't get it to go off. Now that is a little hard on the internal, so don't do that all the time. But yeah, it's not going to go off as long as I'm applying pressure to it. So when I'm sliding it into my holster, I have my thumb on it, pushing against it, keeping that hammer that trigger forward basically, and keeps it from going off, makes it very safe. And with my thumb still on it, once I get it in the holster, I will go ahead and I'll actually use my other fingers and sometimes my offhand to actually feel around and make sure that everything got in the holster was like it was supposed to, and I don't have my shirt trapped in there or something like that. Then once I've checked, I can release my thumb and I'm good to go. And that's just a little tip and trick for those people who are worried about holstering and unholstering safely, and especially nice with these hammers that have flat back ends on them. Just put your thumb there, apply some pressure. It doesn't have to be a ton, but enough, and it's not going to go off. Like I said, if I remove my thumb, then it goes off, but otherwise it's not going to go off. It's just fine that way. Perfectly safe. Hammer fired guns, as far as holstering and unholstering, if you know what you're doing and you know how to use them, can be very safe. And like I said, reholstering this gun, you know, assuming that you have a round in the chamber and it's just been fired or whatever, or you just got done racking around, decock it, makes it harder to pull. Put your thumb behind it, makes it a ton harder to pull. Go ahead and insert it, do whatever checking you need to while still applying some pressure with your thumb, and then once you're sure that you don't have anything caught in the holster with the gun and whatnot, go ahead and release it and you're good to go. Very safe gun that way. And like I said, for me, I don't personally find it to be hard to conceal on myself. You guys saw me at the beginning of the video. Doesn't print overly bad. It's maybe not the most concealed on the face of the planet, but it's not bad, especially for a gun that across the diagonal is like 10.5 inches. That's pretty good. And like I said, it holds, well, technically 22 rounds with one in the chamber with these extended base plate magazines, but normally it's a 19+1 setup. More than sufficient for most things, I would say. If you want to carry a spare magazine or two, completely up to you. I personally don't feel the need to when I'm carrying this thing, and the main reason why I like it is because it does have that longer barrel. Most of the mass is in the barrel. This is a fairly heavy gun. This is a little over 32 pounds, not 32 pounds, that would be a very heavy gun, a little over 32 ounces unloaded, but the vast majority of it is in that slide, which means that very little felt recoil because it's the slide that moves, and the spring on this one is such that it actually catches the slide pretty well in most cases. So not bad on recoil at all. Like I said, this one I can shoot just almost, not quite there, but almost as effectively as I can my 22 Magnum pistol. And 22 Magnum does not have a lot of recoil at all. Neither does this. It is absolutely fantastic. Especially if I can get a good grip on it. It would be nice if those smooth sides they actually had texture on, but they don't. But yeah, with a decent grip on it, man, it's a fun gun to shoot. Accurate, easy to manipulate. I love the controls on it. They're nice and big, but they're low enough in profile that they don't tend to get in the way. Really good combination of features, which is what I would normally expect for CZ. Now, things that you do need to know about, and this happens with pretty much every CZ handgun I've ever had, is there is a roll pin retaining pin that holds in the, what's that called? The firing pin, sorry. So there's a retaining pin that holds in the firing pin, and unfortunately the factory one that comes with is a roll pin, and roll pins tend to break rather easily. So at some point down the line you're going to need to replace that roll pin. It's usually somewhere between the 750 round to 1100 round mark, and that includes dry firing, and I do a lot of dry firing. And so yeah, that roll pin will eventually break and it'll need to be replaced. My recommendation would be, as soon as you buy the gun, just go to CZ Custom. It's a place you can find online that's not CZ itself, it's not the main company, but it's an aftermarket company that specializes in upgrades for the platform, and get the roll pin from them. It's a very cheap roll pin, and as long as you have a few pins and punches at home, you can tap out the old one, tap in the new one pretty easily. Sometimes you have to ream the hole. I find that filing down the replacement roll pin works just fine too, but from CZ Custom you can actually get the solid pin from them instead of the hollow one that it comes with. Get the solid pin, put the solid one in there, and then it's going to last a lifetime. It's just fine. So that's the only thing that's really prone to breaking on these things is the retaining pin. Also, it depends on the person, but the trigger return spring can sometimes break as well. But Again, CZ Custom has those. They're relatively cheap, not too hard to replace at all. Most things on the CZ line are actually pretty easy to work on. If I can work on them and I'm not an overly mechanical person, then pretty much everyone can work on them. But yeah, this one I replaced the return trigger spring on, I replaced the pin on it, and I've been perfectly happy with it ever since. It's just one of those things that are known with CZs. There's a couple parts that are from the factory that they come with that they're not really meant to stay there, because with CZs, everybody loves to modify the triggers, and so they figure that people are just going to replace the trigger parts anyways. So they don't put the best parts in there, which is kind of annoying, but like I said, it's easy to replace, easy to modify, so I don't worry about it too much. So do be aware of that. Oh, and another thing that you need to be aware of with CZ that is a bit of an issue is that CZs are prone to rusting. I've experienced glimmers of that issue with pretty much every CZ that I've owned, whether it be my CZ75 Compact, my P-09, or even my CZ Scorpion. They're all a little prone to rusting, and so if you're a CZ owner, gun oil is your friend. Make sure that you coat everything with gun oil. It doesn't have to be excessive, you know, wipe off the excess. You still want it handleable, but make sure that you have gun oil, and especially after you go shooting, take some gun oil and spray it down inside the barrel, because once you're done shooting, well, anything that was in the barrel you literally just shot off, and so it's not going to be protected. So if you're out at the range on a rainy day or humid day, whatever, that can absolutely destroy these guns. So after you're done shooting them, taking a little bit of oil in one of those little mister things, spraying it down the barrel, opening it up, spraying a few of the inside components, just so that until such time as you are able to clean it, it's going to preserve it, it's going to work against the rust and corrosion. It's a good thing. If you are a CZ owner, get some oil. Seriously. CLP usually works pretty good. That's mostly what CLP is. CLP is mostly just a rather basic oil. It's basically all that it is. It's basically just gun oil. So spraying it down with a little bit of CLP works wonders. Have it in your go bag, have it in your range bag, just a little mixture with some CLP in it or some gun oil. And once you're done using it, spray it down, especially down the barrel, because you literally just shot out everything in the barrel. So it's not going to have any oil in it anymore. So you need to definitely get the barrel. And then if you do that, these guns will last a lifetime. They're very durable, very rugged, very reliable. This thing feeds any kind of ammo. Very strange shapes and sizes. Ball ammo, of course. I've had at least 2 different kinds of hollow points in it with fairly different profiles. It's done just fine with them. Even the Fort Scott munitions, the really weird pointy bullets, it feeds those just fine. Eats just about anything. Now, that being said, there are conditions under which I have gotten this thing to fail, and you're going to do that with any gun. If you run any gun long enough, hard enough, under extreme enough conditions, you can get it to fail. And this gun, I have had one failure to extract with it. It was with a very light grain weight, 80 grains, and that was after I had already fired, about 100 rounds through it already, under very dusty, sandy conditions. And of course, since it's a CZ, had quite a bit of lube on it, and that combination of very dusty combined with quite a bit of lube basically turned to sludge, and it didn't have quite enough oomph on one round to quite kick it out. But that is the only malfunction that I've had with this gun, is one failure to extract with a very light load under very adverse conditions. If it's normal defensive loads, 124 grain, 147 grain, stuff like that, never had an issue with it. But very light loads, very adverse conditions, very dirty conditions. The gun itself, like I said, had already been fired over 100 times. And very, very dusty day, combined with a fairly lubed up gun, it just turned to sludge in there, and that will stop any gun. I don't care if it's a Glock or whatnot. I can get any gun to stop. The place where I go and shoot is out in the desert, and the dust out there, when it kicks up, it is awful, because here in Idaho, a lot of our soil is basically clay. And when that clay turns into dust, it is super, super, super fine, And then you add a little bit of moisture to it, and it compacts down. It's basically like modeling clay once you get it wet. And you stick that in something, it's going to gum it up like crazy. And guns are no different. And like I said, it doesn't matter what the gun is. I've gotten pretty much every make and manufacturer of gun to clog up under those conditions. So don't be too hard on the CZ P-09 because of that, okay? Out of the entire time that I've had it, and I've put easily 1,000 rounds through it. I'm probably coming up on 1,500, but easily 1,000 rounds through it, and I've only had one malfunction under very adverse conditions. I think that's pretty good. I can live with that. So yeah, overall not too worried. But yeah, love the thing. It's a pleasure to shoot, easy to shoot, high capacity, nice long barrel on it so that you get good ballistic performance. That's the main reason why I got it. Fairly flat overall profile, and so it does actually conceal a lot better than people think that it does. And it's just absolutely fun. I really do love it. Like I said, there are some things that you need to be aware of. Retaining pin needs replaced. You might need to replace, at least at some point, the return trigger spring. And it is a CZ, so keep it well lubed, otherwise it will rust on you, I guarantee it. Having some oil in your range bag is not a bad idea at all. But other than that, it's a pretty durable gun. I've been very impressed with it, and like I said, except for fairly extreme conditions, I can't get it to not run. Like I said, I've only had one malfunction with it in the entire time that I've had it. I can live with that. I can definitely live with that. I like CZs. They're not perfect guns, but for the price range and the features that you do get and the reliability that you do get, they're more than enough to meet the need. This gun, the base model for it is around $500. And putting that in comparison, you know, a lot of, you know, say Springfields, even a lot of Glocks, so forth, will start at least at $500. If you want the fully tricked out version like this one that has the extra high sights and the threaded barrel and the extended baseplate magazines, that's going to be closer to $600. But you don't really need all of that, and the base models that I've held do just the same thing as far as function are concerned, bells and whistles. But yeah, starts at $500 for a full-size gun that is an absolute pleasure to shoot. It is quite reliable. Make sure that you replace the parts that need to be replaced, but other than that, quite reliable. And also, surprisingly, like I said, lefty-friendly. Even though it is technically a right-handed gun, I can lock the slide just by pushing up on my index finger on my left hand just fine. The hammer drop is on both sides, so I can deal with that. The magazine release I can still get to with my left hand index finger or middle finger just fine, so it's actually a surprisingly lefty-friendly gun. Takedown on it isn't bad. I already said all this. You guys get the points. It's a decent gun. I like it. There are some quirks. It is possible to get it to malfunction. I can find that point with any gun. But considering the price point that it's at, it's pretty solid. Getting all of these kinds of features, especially the added safety of having something that you can decock, as well as manually apply extra force to the trigger to make sure that the trigger doesn't come back on you, that's hard to beat, and very, very, very cool design. Anyways, I like it. Thank you guys very much for your time and attention, and maybe you'll find that you like it too if you're looking for a full-size option. Like I said, it is kind of long. The diagonal is about 10.5 inches, and it does weigh quite a bit, 32 ounces unloaded. And the magazine, of course, is not light because it holds 20 plus rounds. So you have to bear that in mind. But for what it is and what it was designed to do, absolutely fantastic. Thank you guys for your time. Bye-bye.